For more than 4 decades, regulation of pollution and water quality for the nation's waters has been achieved through a productive partnership between state governments and the federal government. And this relationship has been successful because of the recognition that not all waters need to be subject to federal jurisdiction. In fact, that states have the primary responsibility of regulating waters within their individual boundaries. This federal-state partnership was established under the 1972 Clean Water Act. The United States Environmental Protection Agency and the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers are the co-regulators that carry out the federal government's responsibilities under this partnership. The Clean Water Act clearly says up front that it is the policy of the Congress to recognize, preserve, and protect the primary responsibilities and rights of states to prevent, reduce, and eliminate pollution, to plan the development and use, including restoration, preservation, and enhancement of land and water resources, and to consult with the EPA in the exercise of this authority under this Act. The extent of the federal government's authority under the Clean Water Act was limited to, quote, navigable waters, unquote, which under the Clean Water Act are defined as waters of the United States. Sometimes we call it WOTUS. Twice, the Supreme Court has reaffirmed the federal-state partnership under the Clean Water Act, when it told the federal agencies that there are limits to federal jurisdiction under the Act and that they had gone too far in asserting their authority. The federal-state partnership, when parties have recognized and respected their roles and responsibilities, has led to significantly less pollution and cleaner water for our nation. Despite the partnership established under the Clean Water Act and the limits to federal authority, the administration in recent years has sought to expand the scope of federal jurisdiction under the Clean Water Act. Most recently, in April of last year, the EPA and the Corps put forward a proposed rule entitled Definition of Waters of the United States under the Clean Water Act, which the agencies claimed would, quote, clarify federal jurisdiction. I chuckle because there are serious deficiencies with this rulemaking. Moreover, the sequence and timing of the actions that federal agencies have taken to develop this rule undermine the credibility of the rule and the process to develop it, as well as the long-standing federal-state partnership to regulate waters. The administration developed the proposal without first properly consulting state and local authorities, without considering their rights, their responsibilities, their liabilities, and their budgets, and without realistically examining the potential economic and legal impacts on private citizens, farmers, and other stakeholders. The proposed rule misconstrues and manipulates the two relevant Supreme Court holdings, effectively turning those cases that place limits on the Clean Water Act jurisdiction into a justification for the agencies to broaden their authority over all waters. The proposed rule goes far beyond merely clarifying the scope of waters subject to the Act. Rather, it is aimed at increasing the scope of the federal government's jurisdiction over more waters. There are also substantial flaws in the economic and scientific assumptions upon which the rule is based. Many states and local governments have since objected to this erosion of their partnership and their authority. Instead of racing to pass down another federal edict, the agencies should have collaborated with states, local governments, and affected stakeholders. They should have held public hearings and carefully considered the public comments received before putting forward any proposal. The administration's flawed rulemaking process has understandably led to a flawed proposed rule. The agency's push to unilaterally broaden the scope of the Clean Water Act and the federal government's reach into Americans' everyday lives threatens to undermine the integrity of the federal-state partnership and erode state authority by granting sweeping new federal jurisdiction over waters never intended for regulation under the Clean Water Act, including ditches, man-made ponds, floodplains, riparian areas, and seasonally wet areas. This expansion of federal regulatory power also could have serious consequences for the nation's economy, threaten jobs, invite costly litigation, and significantly restrict the ability of landowners to make decisions about their property and the rights of state and local governments to plan for their own development. This flawed process has resulted in a rule that ignores the non-federal partners' concerns and input and creates more uncertainty. Regulation must be balanced in a manner that responsibly protects the environment and recognizes the rights of states and individuals without an unnecessary and costly expansion of the federal government and unreasonable and burdensome regulation of our small businesses, farmers, and families.